So I wanted to come out here and show off my Goji Berry. I would say I could consider it a bush at this point. Now, this thing's been growing here for over 2 years now, and before my parents got this place, my husband would mow this down all the time because it just gets in the way when you're trying to mow, and of course it just comes back, so it's no big deal. But I wanted to show off what it looks like now. It's just kind of doing its own thing. And these branches are very flexible, so they tend to fall over. But even with the cool weather, it's producing really well. I picked an entire pint of goji berries off this just about a week and a half ago. And you can see that quite a few berries are growing back. We have them at all stages. So here is the flower right there. Isn't that so cool? And these are the flowers. And then we have the green berries, and they start off all different ways too. So here's some of the green berries, and this one's not doing so. So there are some that are rotting. It's probably has to do with the temperature being so cold, because these berries really like warm weather. You can see all the green berries, and then here are some as they ripen. And they start off this really light color. After they start ripening, they go from green to this really light orange color. And they're still really thin when they're this color. And then they turn red-ish orange, more of a red orange, I would say. So this is one that's just really turning, and you would think it's ripe right then, but it's actually not. What happens right before it ripens is it gets really fat, like this, and swells out. So this is a ripe goji berry, and that is what it looks like. You can see berries are dropping all over the place from this goji. Some of them look a little rough, they're rotten. The problem with goji berries is you have about 24 hours after you pick them to eat them. They do not last very long, and they are, even when they are at their ripest, like here's a very nice ripe one, they are not very sweet. If you eat one, it's sweet at first, and then after a couple seconds it's extremely bitter, and that's due to all the seeds inside of it. So if I squeeze this, you can see all the seeds that are inside of it, and they're actually quite bitter. So I tried dehydrating these in the oven because our dehydrator went out forever ago and I never replaced it, and they were really hard. Not really what I expected, not so great. Now, I know some people that buy dehydrated gojis and they have a different texture altogether. So I don't know if you have commercial equipment, it just does better for dehydrating gojis, but it definitely did not go the way I planned it. So I think that they would be better off if I dehydrate them, if I go ahead and powder them into a tea and drink the tea. I can add sweetener to it that way, or mixing it with sugar, but you would probably need a pretty large amount if you're mixing them with sugar. Another thing about these plants that I try to be really careful with, especially when it comes to the kids, because they've scratched me a few times, is that they have these really good sized thorns on them. And let me see, here's an example of one of the thorns right here. So that can be pretty painful. It's a woody plant, so these thorns are pretty strong, and they're thin and don't break off easily. So here the plant starts off kind of like this, green, very bendy, and then over time it kind of turns woody, and that only takes a few weeks from the green to do that. And they're still very flexible, so they don't hold their shape very well. They just tend to flop over all over the place. In the backyard we have some growing along the fence where the chickens are, and it props it up, but the birds will eat all the gojis and the leaves constantly. Now, I've heard people say that gojis aren't really good for chickens. I've actually never figured out why that is, because our birds have been eating them and they've never gotten sick from them. Now, our current chickens have never eaten a goji because the gojis back there seem pretty rough from when we had all the ducks and geese. You can see how many gojis are on here, especially after collecting as many as I did last week. So what I tend to do is just pick up the branch straight up like this, and then just hand pick all the gojis off. And yes, it is a bit time consuming with the number that they produce because they are so small. So it does take a lot of time, but they're really full of a lot of vitamins, and so we do enjoy them. It's just that they really do have a bitter taste, and if you're not expecting that, then you might be in for a bit of an unpleasant surprise after about 5 seconds of chewing on them. However, they do produce a ton of fruit. So here's a good example of the clusters that they produce, and these branches are just completely covered. They almost look like a tiny version of Tabasco peppers all over it. Now obviously you can see a lot of damage because they're sitting on the ground and the weather is cold, and gojis do not like cold weather, but they're still managing to produce. Now the issue with gojis is that they will take over everything if you're in a warm setting like we are, and they really do spread fast. But between the animals and us constantly mowing, it hasn't got out of control for us. But this plant actually is probably about 4 foot in every direction. So I'm impressed with the amount that it produces. I think what I'm going to do is cut off some of these branches and actually plant them, or even try by seed, but gojis take so long to grow by seed. I think that I'm going to plant some of these by the little tiny cabin and see if they can kind of grow up the side of it and how that works out. I thought about using blackberries, but now I'm not really sure if that's what I want to do. But I definitely wanted to come out here and show off my goji and how the berries are. I've shown the other ones in the back in the past. See how round this one is? This is one that rotted. But I'm just gonna, here's the round one compared to one that's not. Well, that one's rotted too. Just not having a good goji experience today. So compared to maybe, none of these look good. Well, anyways, even with this partially rot, you can see how this one never ripened all the way versus this one. So there is a massive size difference. A ripe goji is swollen and almost looks like a little jelly bean. But don't be fooled, because it only tastes like one for about the first 3 seconds. And like I said, it's really bitter after that. So this is pretty much the potential of one goji berry, and it's not even as large as it could be because, like I said, it continuously gets mowed over. It's in the front yard in front of the house. So I'm really excited because my mom wants to actually let it grow and see what it can produce, and I'm so excited for that because I really am curious about just what their true potential is like. I know that a lot of people make videos saying they don't like gojis and they wish they would have never grown them. But I really enjoy them, and I think they're really amazing if you like teas, but definitely you have to add some kind of sweetener for them or not really be into chewing them. Find a good way to dehydrate them. I think that ultimately these would be the perfect candidate for a freeze dryer because they would probably puff up and get sweeter and probably be really good to powder or eat like that. So that is something I definitely want to try whenever we get around to getting a freeze dryer, which is something that we want to do in the future. But if you guys know, freeze dryers, not only is the initial cost a bit pricey, they use a lot of electricity and do take up some space. So I definitely want to wait until we have an area specifically designed for processing to really worry about getting a freeze dryer. But here it is. Here's my goji plant and how it's doing. So, you know, if gojis are for you, I hope you'll at least give them a try. Like I said, they're not for everyone, but I do really enjoy them.